Hey, what's going on, guys? Gunshed here, and welcome. So, something I've never really got is some walking around with no shirts on when it's warm. It's a very, I don't know, it feels like a very English thing. I mean, if you're at the beach, fair enough, but I don't want to be out doing my weekly shopping, seeing men with no clothes on. Anyway, so following on from the video that actually went rather well, which was why the motorcycle industry is in decline. So a lot of people pointed out that it's because it's getting more expensive. Now, when I was talking about things like that in the video, you know, I was saying about tests and stuff like that, but it is actually getting more expensive. The biggest reason is the price of bikes in relative terms is on the increase, and the reason for that is it's a bit like cars. You know, there's various technology that has been developed over the last 30-40 years that wasn't in bikes or cars then, but it's trickled down into bikes now. So now, you know, you've got traction control, ABS, ECUs. Okay, they were maybe in bikes 20, 30 years ago. Things like quick shifters, rider modes, and stuff like that. Now, the majority of motorcyclists do it for, you know, pleasure. If you look in the summer, how many bikes there are compared to in the winter, which means that, you know, people don't have to necessarily commute on a bike. They just like doing it, or, you know, sunny weekends, they like to go out on their bike. Because of this, I think people gradually like, you know, all the different bells and whistles that they can get on something. So if you can get, you know, a quick shifter or something like that, then, or something with rider modes, then most people are going to buy it. More and more bikes are coming with these things as standard. And if they're not, I think it was is it the MT-07 or the MT-09? It had basically all the hardware for a quick shifter, but it didn't have the software part of it, and you had to pay extra just for the software. But even if you didn't have the quick shifter, you were still paying for the quick shifter hardware, so that pushes the cost of bikes up. And things like rider modes, stuff like that, you know, most bikes nowadays, well, a lot of sort of the more medium range bikes tend to have them. You know, I would consider this probably at the bottom end of it. And it's got ABS, which it has by law, but it doesn't have rider modes or traction control and things like that. And to be honest, general road riding, if you ride carefully, you don't really need rider modes, you know, rain mode and stuff like that. Okay, it's good, I suppose. But it's like the traction control that I had on my V-Strom, I never once changed it, apart from I rode over a bit of grass and had a huge amount of crap on the rear wheel. So I put it on its like maximum, most obtrusive setting while I rode a couple of miles down the road to clean the wheel off. But all these things cost money. And the more that bike manufacturers perceive them as, you know, people wanting all of this, which most people do, if they can afford to, then the more they'll make it standard. And the more bells and whistles that you bolt onto a bike, it's going to cost money. You know, TFT dashes and things like that. If TFT was cheaper than a normal digital dash, every bike would have TFT dash, but it doesn't, because they are more expensive. You know, things like GS's have adaptive suspension, whereas my V-Strom, you know, and it all does it electronically, whereas my V-Strom, you basically just adjusted the preload with the screw on the side. But still, it's still, you know, technology. And think of what the cost of a electronically adaptive shock is compared to just a normal shock. With all these bells and whistles on bikes, and the value of the bike increasing in real world times, the insurance is going to go up, not only because the value's gone up, because there's that many more things to get damaged in the event of an off. It happened the same with cars. Car insurance went up massively as there was more development in, you know, climate control, and it was becoming more popular in cars and traction controls and in-car sat-navs and all sorts. Because if the ECU of a car got damaged, then a car can be a write-off. Now, car manufacturers often don't put them in very clever places. So for example, I think it's the Vauxhall Astra has it in front of the driver's side wheel behind the front bumper. So basically, if you take a knock, your ECU has had it, which instantly adds £1,000 onto the repair bill. Now I know it's £1,000 because I drowned an Astra in a river. Long story short, I was driving through a ford that sometimes floods and thought, I can get through it, it'll be fine. What I didn't realise was, after I'd taken my car for a service a few days before, they hadn't replaced the waterproof bung on the socket for the diagnostics on the ECU. They pushed the price of insurance up because a write-off is more likely. You know, it's the computer technology in bikes and things with, you know, active suspension and sensors and things like that gets more expensive. Not only are you paying for the suspension that is damaged, you're paying for the computer that powers it, or the whole unit, which is more expensive. Therefore your insurance goes up, because obviously they have to make a little bit of profit on top of what they pay out on an accident. The average service cost is going up. Bikes are getting less easier to maintain yourself. Yes, you know, you can still do chain and stuff like that, but some of these top-of-the-line sports bikes, I was talking to the man at wheels motorcycles, and he was saying the new Aprilia, is it the RS4, basically you have to re-flash the ECU every time you change the air filter. Now, air filters are quite commonly, you know, on older bikes, a simple job that you can do yourself. But when it requires the ECU to be flashed, it means you can't. You know, you can't do things like that, or you can't service fancy suspension as much, or there's various I mean, I'm not particularly mechanically minded, but it's the same with cars. You know, there's lots of McGubbins, and my brother's a really, really good mechanic, but like, for example, he couldn't service my dad's car. He could do like basic oil change and stuff like that, but then, you know, the ECU needs checking and the onboard diagnostics and all that bollocks. Too much for your average home mechanic. There's less that your average monkey can do. If you take, say, a Honda C90, for example, you can do so much more to one of those than you could do to, say, a Triumph Speed Triple. More people are having to use garages to service rather than budget themselves, which I'm not complaining about. It means there's hopefully a few better looked after bikes on the road, which is great for the second-hand market. You know, servicing costs going up. The clothing that you can get nowadays, you know, my dad always says when he learned to ride a bike, he was in, you know, a helmet and a pair of helmet and a barber jacket and a pair of jeans. I mean, yes, you can still do that, but the average person will wear textile waterproofs when it rains, maybe most of the year or something. Maybe a set of leathers for when it's nicer. Maybe they don't ride in rain and they just have a set of leathers. But you know, a set of leathers is slightly more expensive. Helmets now are a lot more advanced than they were, in terms of they've got various composites and all sorts. Granted, the safety is a lot better, but and you can buy cheap helmets that don't cost very much. You know, they have to meet certain regulations. You know, you can now get, you know, my thoughts behind this video is the fact that motorcycling is getting more expensive because of the advancements in technology. The technology pushes up the cost of each element of it. Granted, you don't have to have all this technology. You can go for Chinese bike without the fancy rider modes or quick shifters or auto blippers or all of that stuff. There are bikes out there that are, you know, low in technology, which makes things more affordable, but you know, they tend not to sell as well because people want things like that. People want, you know, the best jacket they can afford because it's going to save them better, or hopefully save them better. Apart from people that ride GSXRs, in which case they afford the nicest t-shirt they can afford. It all pushes cost up, and yes, you know, these things really add to the experience, or the features keep you safe. But that is why it's getting more expensive. As I say, there are sort of lower cost options out there. You can buy a road legal helmet for £40, or you know, you can buy Chinese bikes. They're now starting to do 650s and 600s and things, rather than just 125s and 250s. And there's a lot to be said for those little bikes. I loved my little Zontes, and there was nothing fancy about it. I mean, the fuel gauge was, I said there's nothing fancy. It depended how long you kept going round and roundabout as to when you were going to run out of fuel. Because the needle used to move around after it got below a quarter of a tank. And you can get basic jackets and things like Armour do some cheap kit. And I have to say, I started off with an Armour jacket because I didn't really know any better, and I read some reviews and everyone said they were comfortable, so I bought one. To be fair, it's never let water in. Very waterproof. I just didn't like the safeties. When I fell off my 125, I didn't crash it, of course, I fell off it. I ripped a hole in the sleeve, so I've only worn it if it's really chucking it down. Still waterproof, it's just gone through the lining and I've still got a scar on my arm. Technology is what is making motorcycling more expensive. Is it making it more fun? Maybe. Is it making it easier? Yeah. Is it making it safer? Definitely. Is it worth the extra price? I quite like having a simple bike, you know. I think that's why technology is the main reason why motorcycling is getting more expensive. You know, that what bikes are made out of, it's getting more advanced. And
anyway, unfortunately the battery died as I was recording that, and I didn't notice, so I carried on whittling on. But let me know down below in the comments section what you thought, you know, your thoughts on this are. Is technology ruining bike sales? Is that what is causing sales to dip? Is that what's causing it to get more expensive, to get less people involved? But let me know. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching, and take care.